when I got off the plane and saw that the president, and read what the president came out with in his budget. I think it's unbelievable. $8.7 trillion in new spending, $1.6 trillion in new taxes, $13 trillion in new debt. The current year deficit increased by $1.6 trillion, not 1.4 or 1.5 as they talked about before. And it's just incredible that this could be happening right now. And I just wonder if he didn't get the message of last November 2nd. That is, people know we cannot keep extending the spending. The fact that we had increased in the first 2 years, and this came straight from the White House, from the administration, our spending greater than all spending in the history of this country from George Washington to George W. Bush. I mean, it can't happen. And people are talking about the deficits that took place during George W. Bush. The average deficit was $247 billion. And that was right after trying to rebuild a military. And after 9/11, we found ourselves in, for all practical purposes, 2 wars. So instead of a deficit of being $247 billion, the deficit in this administration has been $3 trillion in 2 years. That's inconceivable. Now, I thought that he'd come out with something after listening to the State of the Union message. It'd be something that would start moderating and start trying to save some money, and it just hasn't happened. The only big loser, this is spending money on everything except the military. I don't know why it is that liberals never want to spend money on the military. An $80 billion cut over a 5-year period in the Department of Defense. And this is right after we went through the 90s where we had a drawdown of our defense by about 40%. And of course, we find ourselves now after 9/11 in 2 wars. So I just think that we need to make sure the American people realize that the State of the Union message sounded real good. When he said we're going to start putting a freeze on. You know what that freeze was, Mr. President? The freeze was to take the non-defense discretionary spending and freeze it for 5 years. But wait a minute, that's after he increased it over 20%. So you increase it so we can't afford it, and then you freeze it there so we can't bring it back down. So anyway, I hope that people are looking carefully and seeing what's happening. They will. If you look at what they're doing just on the oil and gas industry, and I know that there are a lot of people out there in the liberal communities that want to put them out of business, well, they're going to successfully do this if they pass this particular budget. And I'm talking about the percentage depletion, the IDC, the Section 199 manufacturer's deduction. By the way, the only industry under this budget that is affected negatively about that is oil and gas. All other manufacturers in the industry are all right. So I hope people have a chance to look at this very carefully. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor. Yes, the absence of a quorum.